Not many years after the Second Crusade, the Muslim world found a famous leader named Saladin for a holy war against the Christians. Saladin, in character, was a typical Mohammed, very devout in prayers and fasting, fiercely hostile toward unbelievers, and full of the pride of race. To these qualities he added kindliness not surpassed, if equally, by any of his Christian foes. The Third Crusade was caused by the capture of Jerusalem in 1187 by Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt. This is the story of the Third Crusade through the eyes of the Sultan of Egypt, Saladin.
Muslim forces under my command captured the city of Tiberias, but the garrison, led by Count Raymond's wife Eschiva, managed to hold out in the citadel. Christian forces camped at Sephora in order to decide what to do. They don't have the strength to attack, but they are inspired to move forward by the image of Eschiva holding out. Guy Lusignan is inclined to remain where he is, and Raymond supports him, despite the likely fate of his wife if she is captured. Guy, however, is still plagued by the belief of others that he is a coward, and late that night, Gerard, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, convinces him to attack. This would be a huge mistake. Crusaders marched from Sephora in order to engage my forces. They brought no water with them, expecting to replenish their supplies at Hattin. That night, they would camp on a hill with a well, only to discover that it was already dried up. I would also set fire to the brush. The drifting smoke made the tired and thirsty Crusaders even more miserable. I defeated the Crusaders in an area northwest of Lake Tiberias and assumed control of most of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. The Crusaders should never have left Sephora. They were defeated as much by the hot desert and lack of water as they were by my army. Raymond of Tripoli dies of his wounds after the battle. Reynold of Chantalin, Prince of Antioch, is personally beheaded by me. But the other Crusader leaders are treated better. Gerard de Ridefort, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and the Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller are ransomed. After the battle, I moved north and captured the cities of Acre, Beirut, and Sidon with little effort. I made myself Sultan of Egypt and united the Muslims of Syria under my sway, and then advanced against the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. The Christians met us in a great battle near the Lake of Galilee. It ended in the rout of their army and the capture of their king. Even the Holy Cross, which they had carried in the midst of the fight, became the spoil of the conqueror. I quickly reaped the fruits of victory. The Christian cities of Syria opened their gates for me, and at last, Jerusalem itself surrendered after a short siege. Little now remained of the possessions which the Crusaders had won in the east. The news of taking Jerusalem spread consternation throughout Western Christendom. The cry for another crusade arose on all sides. Once more, thousands of men sewed the cross in gold or silk or cloth upon their garments and set out for the Holy Land. When the three greatest rulers of Europe, King Philip Augustus of France, King Richard I of England, and the German Emperor Frederick Barbarossa assumed the cross, it seemed that nothing could prevent the restoration of Christian supremacy in Syria. These great rulers set out, each at the head of a large army, for the recovery of the holy city of Jerusalem. My soon-to-be rival, Richard Lionheart, succeeded his father, King Henry II Plantagenet, after he died. He is crowned King of England in a ceremony at Westminster. However, when Jews arrived with gifts, they are attacked, stripped naked, and whipped by a mob, which then moves on to burn down his houses in the Jewish quarter of London. Not until Christian houses catch fire do authorities move in to restore order. In the following months, Crusaders slaughter hundreds of Jews throughout England. In accompaniment of the Crusades, Crusaders slaughtered Jews in Stamford, England. Also, Jews in York, England committed mass suicide in order to avoid having to submit to baptism. The Jews in York are massacred by crusaders, preparing to set off for the Holy Land. Many kill themselves, rather than fall into the hands of the Christians. Crusaders on a rampage killed 57 Jews in Bury St. Edmunds, England. The German crusaders, attempting the overland route, were consumed in Asia Minor by the hardships of the march and the swords of the Turks. The Germans under Frederick Barbarossa were the first to start. This great emperor was now nearly 70 years old, yet age had not lessened his crusading zeal. The Emperor Frederick, according to most probable accounts, was drowned while crossing a swollen stream, and the most of the survivors of his army, disheartened by the loss of their leader, returned to Germany. The English and French kings finally mustered their forces beneath the walls of Acre, which city the Christians were then besieging. We estimated that 600,000 men were engaged in the investment of the place. After one of the longest and costly sieges they ever carried on in Asia, the Crusaders at last forced the place to capitulate, in spite of all my efforts to render the garrison relief. The expedition of the French and English achieved little. Other than the capture of Acre, my friends Philip and Richard, who came by sea, captured Acre after a hard siege, but their quarrels prevented them from following up this initial success. King Philip soon went home, leaving the further conduct of the crusade in Richard's hands. I expected good things of him. The knightly adventures and chivalrous exploits which marked the career of Richard in the Holy Land read like a romance. Neither did I lack in any of those knightly virtues with which the writers of the time invested the character of the English hero. At one time, when Richard was sick with a fever, I, knowing that he was poorly supplied with delicacies, sent him a gift of the choicest fruits of the land. And on another occasion, Richard's horse, which had been killed in battle, the Sultan caused a fine Arab steed to be led to the Christian camp as a present for his rival. For 2 years did Richard the Lion-Hearted vainly contend in almost daily combat with his generous antagonists for the possession of the tomb of Christ. The English king remained in the Holy Land. His campaigns during this time gained for him the title of Lion-Hearted, by which he is always known. He had many adventures and performed knightly exploits without number, but could not capture Jerusalem. Tradition declares that when during a truce some crusaders went up to Jerusalem, Richard refused to accompany them, saying that he would not enter as a pilgrim the city which he could not rescue as a conqueror. The English king remained for longer in the Holy Land than the other leaders. King Richard and I finally concluded a truce, by the terms of which Christians were permitted to visit Jerusalem without paying tribute, that they should have free access to the holy places, and remain in undisturbed possession of the coasts of Jaffa to Tyre. King Richard then set sail for England, and with his departure from the Holy Land, the Third Crusade came to an end. King Richard, on his return from the Holy Land, was shipwrecked off the coast of the Adriatic. Attempting to travel through Austria in disguise, he was captured by the Duke of Austria, whom he had offended at the siege of Acre. My fellow friend regained his liberty only by paying a ransom equivalent to more than twice the annual revenues of England.
In the end, it is debatable on whether or not the Third Crusade was a success. Though the Crusaders were not successful in achieving their main goal, which is to capture Jerusalem, they were, however, able to bring down Acre. Richard was also able to successfully create a peace treaty with Saladin, which allowed pilgrims to enter the holy city. Although the Muslims were in control most of the time, it is up to the person to decide whether or not the Third Crusade was successful. As for our modern example of the Crusades, we chose the Holy War in the Central African Republic. In comparison to a holy war, similar to how Muslims fought Christians in the Crusade. In Central Africa, the Catholic government is fighting a war against its own Muslim citizens as a type of cleansing for Central Africa. Just as the Catholic government in Central Africa is trying to exterminate and take control over all of Central Africa, wanting to become a Catholic state, so was Saladin and the Islamic forces as they took over Jerusalem and most of the Middle East in an attempt to make Islam the primary religion.